So today we're going to set up a scene inside of Unreal, and we're going to learn how to use the sequencer to control cameras so that we can make little mini cinematics. So what I've done here is I've started with a third person demo level. You can see here I've placed a cylinder and then one of the props from the starter content, because what I'm going to do is kind of mimic the Indiana Jones sequence where Indy first sees the idol at the other end of the temple. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a sequencer, and we're going to control a camera. So first thing I'm going to do is get a sequencer node. So I'm going to right click in my content browser, go to animation, and I'm going to go down to the menu. It says level sequence. This gives me a sequencer. I'm going to set up a master sequence because I'm going to use this sequencer to control other camera sequences later on. Okay, so this is basically going to be my video editor whenever I finish setting up my cameras. So I'm going to add a new, I'm going to add a new level sequence. I'm going to call this cam1 underscore 1. And then I'm going to double click cam1, and this brings up the sequencer. Now I'm going to use this sequencer to create a brand new camera, and I can do that at the top of the sequencer. There's a little camera icon. If I select that, you can see that my screen changed, and I have a bunch of new options here. So I have a camera component, I have the camera current aperture, focal length, manual focus. We're not going to mess with that right now. And then I have the transforms, which is my location, rotation, and scale of the camera. So we're going to do a couple of things here just so that we can set our camera up so that we can start behaving more like a director so that we can see through our camera. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to split up my viewport so that I can see two different aspects of my viewport. I want to see my perspective view like we normally look at, and I want to set up a view through the camera specifically. So I'm going to go into my viewport, and there's in the upper left hand corner there's a little pull down triangle. I'll select that, and I'm going to go down to layouts and go to two panes. So now I have my perspective view, and then I have my perspective view that looks a little bit different. So this actually has some camera control, and so what I want to do here is I want to look through this specific camera that I set up for my sequencer. So I'm going to click on perspective, and I'm going to scroll down. So we have perspective, top, bottom, left, right, and then we have placed cameras, cinematic, camera actor 14. So I'm going to click that. So now I'm looking through that specific camera, and you can tell because I have this camera selected in my perspective viewport, I have the little mini camera, and so you can see that these two images match up. So it's showing them looking through that actual camera. This new cinematic viewport has some interesting things in it. It lets you know like what your zoom is. It's 35 millimeter, but it also has some composition tools here. In the upper right hand corner, you'll see that there's the rule of thirds grid. If I select that and click on the grid 3x3, I now get my rule of thirds grid that will pop up in my viewport. So this allows me to use this to set up compositions so that I get a better looking cinematic. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and move my camera into the starting position so that I can start capturing my cinematic. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and fly my camera behind my actor. I'm using the Q key to scroll down, or to move the camera down, and W ASD to move forward. So I'm going to start at the ankles of my character here, and I want my camera to focus on his feet. So right now you can see that they're out of focus. So with my cinematic camera actor selected, if I go down into my details panel, I have some settings here. Whenever you first select on this focus setting in the details panel should be collapsed. So if we click on the little pull down tab here, you can see that I have some focus settings here. Under manual focus distance, if I click the little eyedropper here and then move into my scene and click, you can see that it has now focused on the ankle of my character. And then I'm going to select set keyframe, so that is now going to fix that focus to the ankle of my character. And I am also in my sequencer under transforms, I'm going to select this add keyframe. So now I have a keyframe that starts at the ankles of this character. So now I'm going to pull my time slider over to about 75 frames. I'm going to right click inside the viewport. I'm going to hit E and just kind of tap up to about right here. And so what I'm doing is I'm using this rule of thirds to compose where I want my end shot to be. So I have my character in the bottom part of the rule of thirds where this little cross sets up, and then I have the golden idol in this upper rule of thirds. So I'm going to rotate it around just a tad bit, so like that. So now my character is looking at the object. So what I want to do is go ahead and place a keyframe for the camera here. And so now if I scrub back through, you can see that my camera tracks up my character's body. So I'm going to go back to that keyframe. I can switch between keyframes by selecting the little arrows on the transform between either side of this set keyframe. And now, let's see what's going on here. Okay, so it's just a camera artifact. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to again focus on the back of my character's head, set a keyframe. Now, just to create that cinematic feel, I'm going to move my time slider to, we'll say 90, roughly 90, doesn't really matter. Then I'm going to select my manual focus again, and I'm going to click on that background object and set a keyframe. And so now, if we play our animation, camera comes up and then changes focus onto the object. So right now our animation runs a little long, so we have extra frames here. I'm going to move my time slider, and we have a little red bar here at the very end of our animation. If we click and drag that, this is actually cutting down the length of our video. So I'm going to go back to my viewport, and I'm going to hit play. You can see my animation goes up and stops at that location. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy Cam 1, duplicate. Now it calls itself Cam 2. Double click and open, and you can see that we have our camera. We'll go ahead and look through that camera. So by the way, on the sequencer, if you click on the little camera in your time slider here, or your your sequencer section, it will automatically pull up your camera in your viewport. or active viewport. So basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give myself a separate camera move. So I'm going to move this camera roughly here. I'm going to delete, just drag select, delete the keyframes. But I want to kind of start here. I'm going to move forward, rotate around. So I'm roughly like this, like that. And I'm going to hit set keyframe, and then I'm going to drag that keyframe to the beginning. Apologize, they're doing construction in the building. You probably hear that in the background. Okay, so now my main frame starts on frame 1, and it's looking at my character. So I'm going to go ahead and set my focus on the character's face. I'm going to move my time slider out to about 75 again. This time I'm going to hit the S key, and I'm going to fly my camera backwards until I get on the opposite side of my little idle, like that. And I'm going to move the camera down, slide over. So now I reversed that rule of thirds. So now my idle is in the main part of the scene here. Let's come down a little bit. So now my idle is in the end part of the scene, or the left hand, excuse me, the right hand side of the scene, and my character is on the left hand side. So basically what we're doing is we're setting this up to show the player we have our hero character who is seeing the thing that they want to go get, and then we are going to fly the camera behind the object that we want to acquire and still show that our character is in the scene. So I'm going to go ahead and select our transform. So it sets a keyframe. I'm going to drag just to make sure everything sets up correctly, and it does. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that my character stays in focus until we get to the end. I'm going to move my time slider one last time. Select the eyedropper, select on the idle. So now we're going to play, and the camera flies out and ends on the idle. Alright, so now we have both those camera moves. So now what we're going to do is close that sequencer. We're going to open up the master sequencer. I'm going to grab camera 1, drop it into the master, and so now we have a film time strip, very much like in Premiere. Cam 2, drag that in, and we are going to move this piece of film to the end. And so now that you can see the two cameras, I'm going to click on this master shot camera. So now it's going to play, show my master shot in the video screen here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play. Camera moves up, and then it flies back. Okay, so the reason it stopped there is because the length of our animation is shorter than the actual video that we shot. So I'm just going to click and drag and lengthen that out just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play one last time so we can watch this function. So see it move, travels back, and there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. So there is our cinematic.